Warning. Modern political discourse is a war of sloganeering that takes place primarily on advertising platforms.
Another way to think of it is like a fart sniffing contest. We're all just like really getting into sniffing each other's farts and how great the people who agree with us as farts are and how bad the farts are the people we don't like.
And who's secretly farting?
Yeah, who
dealt it?
Who dealt it?
We're an army of smellers looking for who dealt it.
That's the world.
Today's episode of Seriously Wrong is brought to you by really accurate, on-point metaphors. Now, a lot of shows these days, they're going to have loose, sloppy metaphors.
They don't illuminate anything. They don't bring forth just this deep truth bursting into your mind, something that we strive for and we deliver.
Now, there's 3 secret methods to metaphors that really pop.
Oh, you're going to give away the secrets. Okay.
The first is try scatological. Scatological metaphors really stick in the mind. They're vivid and they work. Number 2, sexual metaphors, involving genitalia especially. Genitalia-based sexual metaphors really stick in the mind. And third, metaphors that are based on interpersonal conflict, a real tension. So the ultimate metaphor would be both scatological and sexual and involves a conflict, but we've got a creative audience, I'll leave that to you.
Systemic trouble, time to break out of your bubble and be wrong.
It was a day like any other at Wrong Boys Detective Agency. Detective Sean and Detective Aaron were taking a break between taking on mysteries and cases to get to the bottom of. They were kicking back, relaxing, and listening to old tapes. A Xenon Group classic, How to Solve Mysteries. They'd already listened to that tape many times, but doggone it, it's comforting to listen to something you know well and connects with your deepest values. And then he walked in, the strangest little man that either of them had ever seen. He was as small as a mouse, but he had a heart made of steel. His suspenders were a different color than his belt, and he was wearing both. Honest to God, wearing both. Shoes 2 sizes too big for his teeth, but he didn't walk weird on them. Finest, most polished teeth in Wrongtown they'd ever seen. Everybody called this little man the milkman, even though he never delivered a drop of milk in his life. And he even went on to open a nylon store, but that's a story for another day. When the bells ring as he walked into Wrongtown Detective Agency, Detective Aaron and Detective Sean knew that their lives would never be the same.
Hey, sir, Detective Aaron here. Some mighty fine teeth.
Hey, I'm Detective Sean. Try to solve a mystery every week. What seems to be the problem? Okay. You want us to solve the mystery of what is Snark.
And whether it's good or not.
Now, at this point, Sean and Aaron turned their heads towards each other and locked eyes, like twins, making the same face that Jim makes on The Office towards the camera. The U.S. version of The Office. Jim face.
Wow, what a great mystery.
Let's solve that. I've done a great job of ranking all mysteries from most important to least important and starting at the top.
Yeah, this really says something about your values, am I right?
Good ones. Good values.
Yeah, great. They're really, yes.
Love it.
That's what I meant. Good. They're good.
Oh, no, you don't have to give us an extra amount of, well,
yeah,
sure,
I
okay,
mean,
yeah. We'll try to do it faster. Thanks,
can't say
sir.
no. Might not, yeah. Thank you.
The generous little man filled up the Wrong Boys' pockets with money to solve the case, over and over, depositing more and more of his savings into any pocket he could find. And they were wearing cargo pants and stuff. Front pocket, side pocket, back pocket even. Stuffing and stuffing. Wads of bills.
You just try to subliminally plant that image.
Yeah, I think it'll work.
Cool.
Will the Wrong Boys find out What is Snark, and is it good?
Yep.
Will the tiny little man ever stop stuffing bills into all of their available pockets at their Wrongtown detective agency place in exchange for solving mysteries?
Nope.
And finally, will the Wrong Boys develop a comprehensive snark strategy that can help liberate humankind from bondage and create solidarity amongst all human beings and solidarity towards that very specific end? I speak, of course, of perfect utopia, 10,000 years of world peace, guaranteed basic outcome for everyone, the abolition of intellectual property, a library-based socialism that takes care of all, a greater abundance than has ever been experienced in human history. We have the technology. Will the Wrong Boys do it?
Listen to find out.
Sometimes I've found myself reading over like a really long Facebook thread of all leftists just making little jabs at each other, interpreting each other in the least charitable way to try to cut the other person down, and be like, just every comment is an accusation that the other person has implied something bad.
I think this is one of the reasons I stay out of a lot of leftist groups, because at least in mixed political groups, when everyone's being snarky to each other, I feel like it's warranted. But when it's just all amongst leftists, it makes me sad.
There was this thread I saw that was about, there was a woman, I think she's like a celebrity, and she's black and says that she's going to wear fur to protest police brutality because like PETA and other organizations are prioritizing the well-being of animals over human beings who are black, who are disproportionately affected by police violence and discrimination. And then, so the whole thread was just the most unmitigated omnidirectional leftist snark of people being like, oh, I'm going to be racist until we fight climate change because climate change is more important and you have to do a bad thing to protest worse things. Right. And then other people were implying that it was racist to care about animal welfare
at all up until racism is solved.
Yeah, or just straight up everyone has to completely drop fighting animal cruelty.
Yeah, I saw the one comment that was just like it was something like side eye at anyone who's an animal rights activist in this political climate. It's like, well, okay. I mean, I think she's making a good point in the initial thing, like just like this is a better priority.
I think as like a stunt, as a way to start conversations, generate headlines in this environment, I think it's a pretty strong action, and it's a good point. And I think pretty much everyone, if asked directly, is like, is the suffering of human beings more important than the suffering of animals? Well, there's probably people who
not
disagree.
Everyone, but most people.
So the thing that made me sort of sad about it was that in the 100 people or so in this thread, probably the vast majority of people agree on some common truths here, some common important things.
So like to even like have this specific of a disagreement, the amount of things that you have to all agree on is a prerequisite to not be arguing about something else, something bigger than it is like amazing. Like it's just, there's so much.
But then amongst ourselves, just weaponizing these indirect, snide comments and just like the contempt underneath it for each other. Not just do I disagree with you, which like they didn't really disagree with each other that much, maybe about the tactics a bit and stuff, but like,
yeah,
I disagree with you, so I'm just going to assume the absolute worst about you. Your motivations are suspect.
So there's this guy, David Denby, who wrote a book about snarkiness, and he's got a bunch of great quotes. One of them is, it's the bad kind of invective, low, snide, teasing, condescending, knowing. I like the inclusion of condescending and knowing there, because there's always this sort of positional aspect to it of like, I'm above you and I know more than you and I'm talking down to you. It's not just a joke at someone else's expense. It's a joke at someone else's expense for an audience that we're all superior to you.
Yeah, like a good piece of snark is like casting a little hierarchy spell in language.
Yes.
Being like reciting the words in just such a way to create a mental map where one person's reduced and the other person's enlarged.
And it's always reactive. It's always reacting to something. It doesn't create new images or ideas. This is Denby again. It's parasitical, referential, and insinuating, and differs from satire because of its contempt for absolutely everyone. Like you can't formulate snark without this like felt meanness.
It bears saying every now and then. Generally speaking, being nice is better than being mean. Not that there's not any room for any meanness ever in any context or anything like that. I would never be so naive as to say that. But generally speaking, in most contexts, like, you don't want to just be mean all the time. And on the online waters that we're swimming in now and that we're part of, and I'd say neutral to mean is the norm. Like, that's part of the long history of the internet. It's like a proud part of internet culture back from like message board days is like the razzing and the sharpness and the invective and the implying things about each other. Like, the number one thing that the internet does is get people to imply things about each other. Like, so much people are casting so many implicit things about each other online.
Condescending insinuations, yeah.
Condescending insinuations stretch back to the very beginning of the internet, but in the modern context now, people are doing the condescending insinuations from their real name to people they know in real life. In some case,
right, yeah. Instead of just anonymously on message board, because like part of it initially on the internet comes from like, oh, I don't know who any of these people are. It's all just text. It's like derealifying this social experience by putting this mediated thing in the middle of it, this message board, this fact that's just text and username, like handles, rather than your real name. But that mode of discussion, that mode of discourse has become so widespread that we do it all the time. We do it when we're arguing with family members or friends or anyone on the internet. It's just how you talk to people on the internet.
Maybe that is the best way to get to the right ideas, right? Like, instead of picking apart ideas in their substance and being like, oh, good point, but I think this, and, having like a real quote unquote civil discourse, but just going up to each other as two sort of like snarky satirists and just being like, I'm crazy, I think the things you think, blah, blah, blah. I'm revealing what a horrible person I am. And then just like back and forth as a performance. And then everyone's like, oh, which side am I going to join? Maybe that, I don't know what the best way to get to the best ideas is.
Yeah, maybe. It could be.
We now go to the old leftist communication strategy meeting sketch, where the two heads of the left sit down to bang their heads together and figure out how exactly to convince the masses of the righteous truth.
What if we snidely tease people we disagree with in a condescending way?
Oh, that's such a great idea. Then they'll know that if they don't change their behavior, they're worthy of humiliation.
I don't know about you, but I always find when I act really condescending and toxic online, people seem to really like me. It tends to change a lot of minds, tends to just really get positive momentum going, gets people saying, yes, I agree. Thank you for changing my mind.
The way to do it is you take whatever idea you want to project and then find a way to frame it in terms of a derogatory, contemptuous comment towards someone you see as lesser than you.
See, I don't even bother thinking about an idea I want to project. All I do is I look around for idiots saying dumb shit, and then this is the great thing about it. I don't even have to articulate a counter argument. I just have to insinuate the worst possible thing about them that I can based on what they said, and everyone understands they're bad and wrong and I'm great, and it's easy. That's the best part. It's just so easy.
Yeah, that's a good point. You don't even have to really articulate an alternative or express any you can just,
you don't have to articulate an argument or a counter argument. It's neither.
You can just quickly position yourself as above them by itself with no content. Just absolutely no content except doubt.
Yeah, the content of like a deeply paranoid reading of whatever they said, which is, I can shoot those out of my bottom at any time. They smell great.
I gotta say, I agree with you. They smell great.
I could sniff them all day.
You know what I won't smell? Their farts.
Oh, the stuff they're shooting out their bottoms?
Yeah,
no thank you.
Disgusting. I wouldn't smell that at all.
Yuck.
Every time I smell one of those, I'm waving my hand in front of my face, going, ugh, P.U.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. It's like you only like them when they come from your own team.
Yeah, I always think that when it's coming from our team, it actually brings me closer to them.
But it's just like ours smell good. They just do smell good, and theirs just do smell bad. So that's the main point for me.
Yeah, I totally agree. They do smell good, and when I smell it, I go, oh, fuck yeah. It smells damn good.
So just to be clear, leftist communication strategy from us, heads of the left, is continue to smell each other's farts a lot.
And now back to the show. I've got a little bit of a theory of Snark, that Snark has like a narrative built into it of which group is good and which group is bad. So it's like easier to stick in people's minds. And like in political communications, one of the things they advise doing is framing up against an enemy, because it just goes down the brain smooth. It just fits into our social conception of reality easier. So if you want to express an idea, you like frame it in terms of an enemy and like what an idiot they are. So like, because that goes down smooth, there's this feedback loop where if you're taking down the enemy and people feel good about, they're like, oh, this is a representation of how I'm right and the people I dislike are wrong, and that feels good and it clicks right away, and it's only the length of a tweet. I'm going to throw that like down there. You get way more likes for a snarky tweet than like a 10-page article that is providing data backup and giving people a really deep and nuanced understanding of something that's important. You can also tackle the subject matter that's important in the form of a short-term tweet that frames a good idea very briefly in terms of an enemy or an enemy idea, which creates a cycle because people respond more to that because it's easy to digest. Then the people who are creating the content, the thought leaders of subcultures and ideologies, have an incentive to get more and more sardonic and critical and cutting and indirect and sarcastic. So the mental resources of these people who are reading the room, the better they are at reading the room, the more they're going to be pandering to this audience. And then the risk at the end of that is all their content is snarkier than it need be, and that people's first exposure to these ideas are in the form of these echoes of the deeper ideas that are framed in terms of snark and conflict. And their first experience of socialism is that people who aren't socialists are fucking idiots. And that is at the root, it's the core of their anarchism, the core of their communism is fuck everyone else. We're so smart and so great. Because that's the implicit framing of the mediums and the culture. And they sort of memorize the bumper sticker version instead of the theory and concepts underneath that are more important and liberatory, and believe very strongly in things that they don't understand very well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, there's two things I think I want to say to that. The first is that I think partially what you're talking about is this meat versus meme distinction we've made before, meaning the idea that things you talk about on the internet often get compressed necessarily by the nature of the mediums. People get gists of ideas, meme versions of them, and not the full idea. And as those further replicate out, the quality of them degrades and you get less understanding.
Like a Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox.
Exactly. So I think that's real, and Snark plays a role in that, or Snark can lead to that, but I don't think Snark is the only thing that can lead to that. I think it's a function of compressed information, reading headlines. But the other thing you were talking there about everyone else being fucking idiots, it hits on something that I wanted to talk about that when I was preparing for this episode really stood out to me as one of the key features of Snark, which is paranoia. And I think the paranoia usually present in Snark contributes to that, and also contributes to the degradation of the quality of the copies of the Xeroxes as it's going. Because, well, the reason that Snark is paranoid often is because, someone makes a tweet that you think is bad. Is it easier to mock the tweet if you assume that it's an honest mistake and you give them a really charitable reading? Or is it easier to mock the tweet if you assume that it means the worst possible thing that it could mean? So as, a joke, as Snark is usually a joke, it's funnier to go for the paranoid reading every time. But also it's paranoid because, Snark is... One way I heard it described that I really liked is that it's the online version of a snicker, or of yeah, really, okay. You kind of with your friend, you two look over at each other and...
Gym face.
Yes, gym face. Yeah, exactly. Snark's this socially mediated thing because it relies on insinuation or whatever. It relies on you and the other person being on the same page enough to get it. get what you're saying. Like, it's often referential and iterative. Like, it's self-referential, and like you need to kind of know the author to know what they're implying. And that's why it fosters this in-group mentality and this sequestering off of these little snark bubbles. And it's like you and your friends, and you all already knew that the thing was going to be bad, that the tweet from the idiot was going to be stupid. And it was, and you were right, and you expected the bad thing, and the bad thing came, and anyone who didn't expect the bad thing is naive or stupid or whatever. It goes against that, to not have a paranoid reading, to not have already expected the worst from the beginning, and to have been found correct in the worst.
That is another thing about the web culture of this sort of like detached, bigger than it all, sunglasses on your ideology sort of thing on the internet, of like that people people insulating themselves from criticism by being above it all and already know things, and like sort of pessimistic and hopeless. Like I feel like there's a thread there in
I wrote shield against humiliation and vulnerability. You know, I can't be made to look a fool for having hope about something if I don't have hope, if I knew it was going to go terribly from the beginning, because it always goes terribly and it always will go terribly. And everyone who doesn't know that is an idiot and who is being mocked by the knowingness that, oh yeah, we know that this is stupid, and we're Jim facing at each other because this is like we see through the lies and the artifice and the vacuousness, and we're laying it bare for everyone to see with this sharp, pointed comment that makes us all laugh together.
So Snark is sort of like rhetorical journalism of uncovering the real truth, you know, that
I think that's the emotional place behind it, right? Like, you want to look at what they're saying and you want to expose the lies behind it, the dangerous narratives that it's perpetuating, the social ills that it's contributing to. You want to uncover the ulterior motives behind what people are saying and make it clear.
Sometimes it feels like, well, I think it's probably true in a sense, because like language and rhetoric and politics has this element of poetry to it. But there's this omni-critique. There's always an angle through that sort of paranoid, snarky lens where
everything sucks.
Yeah, everything sucks and everything is disingenuous and people are always showing their true nature, which is evil. And like, if you accept all of the critical claims as true, the outcome is that literally everything all the time is bad. I think in reality it comes out in the way of like different groups rule out different, like people have different favored critiques and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, all of the critiques that are being made cover everything. Part of the way that I think web-enabled snark has developed into this thing that it is now, which is this, it's the air that we breathe. We're swimming in the water of snark, and you don't see it. It's just, I've also thought about it in terms of Twitter voice, where you have all these reoccurring memes that show up in people's tweets. Stuff like saying daily reminder at the beginning of a tweet. Well, what's that implying? What is that implying? It implies you've already had a chance to understand this.
You've had the chance to understand it every day for all time, or
but
for a while.
I need to get it through to you, you thick-skulled moron.
I've said this every single day.
We've been saying this over and over and over again, and it's so reasonable and obvious.
Past 800 days, every day I've said it. 801. Let's give it a shot.
A lot of times those tweets, the daily reminder tweets, especially the ones that go viral, they got a good point in it, by all means. But something that a little bit bothers me is when people imply that extremely esoteric and complex and hard to understand ideas should immediately be common sense. Sometimes, I'm just like, oh, come on, it's not my daily reminder. I haven't thought about that shit in weeks, and I'm very engaged.
Well, you're just not reading their Twitter where they remind us people every day.
They just set up a bot to literally, I think that's a good rule. If you're going to say daily reminder,
it has to actually be daily, at least for 1 month.
If you don't do that, then how are you going to convince people of the strength of the ideas? Oh, what I wanted to say was that the platforms that we use, Twitter and Facebook, the public text-based communications infrastructure has its own logic to it, which I think snarkiness is something that the internet didn't invent, but it's definitely something that's flourishing on the internet. And there's a couple of reasons why that might be. The like social isolation of it, not seeing other people's eyes and seeing their full humanity when you're talking to them, and also broadcasting, the performative nature of it and stuff. But the medium is part of the story here. The medium is part of Snark, I think. Like if we want to get to the bottom of what Snark is and whether or not it's good, these social media platforms are definitely part of the picture.
Today's episode of the Seriously Wrong podcast is brought to you by a brand new innovation in online internet snark. This is so streamlined, so sleek, so perfect, amazing, beautiful. You don't even have to say any words. When someone on the Facebook platform says something really stupid, all you have to do, little haha react. Don't even need to respond. It's snarky, it's incisive, it's cutting. Boom. It's amazing. It's beautiful. It's the sponsor of today's episode, and we love it.
No, man, I actually really hate haha reacts. Like a condescending haha react.
Just that little perfect circle with the big smile. You don't just love that?
No, I hate it. I hate it. Frankly, I'm tempted to do it. I used to do it. This is my 2019 resolution. I haven't condescending haha reacted anything yet. I want to be like a real Gandhian about this. No matter how much you haha react my serious point, I will never haha react yours. I'll angry face if you cross the line, but I'll never ever haha react when you're stupid.
I appreciate your tactic, but it's not my tactic. I've actually haha reacted a bunch already in 2019. I have a couple examples here. I just want you to tell me whether you think these were justified.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
Bird Box. For people who aren't listening to this week and have forgotten about it, Bird Box.
Yeah, it's a Netflix movie about Sandra Bullock not being able to look at monsters.
Bird Box was okay-ish. It's interesting, though. In the movie, you can't see or you'll die. Another new Netflix movie, if you make any noise, you'll die. What exactly are we being conditioned for? I gave that a snarky haha. And I was out.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I mean, I'm not gonna condemn you over that.
I think you should. Oh, okay, you didn't want to condemn me?
Okay, for sake of content, I'll condemn you. What you should have done instead is give them no reaction at all, unless you like it, love it, it makes you angry, or it makes you sad.
Or a genuine laugh
it's
with
a humorous, yeah, sort of they've shared a joke. Sure, laugh then. And you should have posted a very civil, quick comment that says, I'm not sure we're being conditioned to anything. That seems like a large logical jump.
Yeah, maybe it's just a coincidence these two movies have similar premises.
Yeah, it's a good device, and it's a good.
They're churning out a lot of movies right now. Okay, how
generally
about
that sort of assumption about the world is not going to be right. You might want to like put it out in words so they have a chance to evaluate it. Instead, they're like, "Oh, I feel small. I'm being humiliated." This is like elementary school again. They're all laughing at me.
I'm going to read this. It's kind of a long comment. You stop me when you think it's valid that I haha reacted. I assume it'll happen at some point as I'm reading.
Okay.
Well, it's beyond selfish, narcissistic, and immoral to breed at all, and it is the worst form of pollution there is. Real talk. Plus, it is abusive towards your significant other to breed instead of valuing your relationship together. There is nothing good about procreation. It would be great if everyone was sterilized.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
It would be...
Yeah, I get it.
Are you sure? I'm not even a quarter of the way through this.
When you talk about
thing.
Human breeding that way, you really sound like some sort of
You can also look at the true
villain.
definition of procreation while we're at it. Procreation, the ancient art of betraying your significant other by making them second fiddle to a person who didn't even have to exist in the first place.
That's a procreation villain right there.
Yeah, using the word breeding so often and like...
It sounds like Elliot Rodger or something.
Yeah, it was...
narcissistic, selfish breeders.
So I gave him a haha.
But what if he thought... Here's another thing. What if he thought What if she thought, oh, he's laughing at how great my anti-breeding dunks and my...
Yeah, it's not really for her benefit. It's for all the people who are on my side and know me and know what we all think is dumb, who see that I laugh react to that, and they are like, oh, yeah, we're all smarter than her. That's more what this is about. This is about the collective, what me and my pals think about how dumb this is. It's not for her benefit.
All right. Well, as far as I'm concerned, other people are still allowed to haha react. Those were some bad
you.
posts.
That's
I
all
get
I
it.
wanted.
You want to quickly send that message and participate in the cycle of online acrimony in that way. And that's your right. And, I'm working on, I feel like there's a benefit for my participation in the circle of online acrimony to avoid the haha reacts. Not that I'm not going to be,
Acrimonious at all?
I will still keep some of the acrimony, absolutely. It'll be online. But
Going online without any acrimony is
I'm just going to prefer
tall order.
to try to very quickly and articulately say specifically what my problem is.
Cool. Yeah, you can do that, and I'll do my thing.
A/B test. We'll see how it goes.
So that's the sponsor of the show, Condescending Haha Reacts. It's an in-depth ad.
Or the absence thereof could also be the sponsor.
It's nice, get a sponsor from both sides. That way you win either way.
And they both reach the audience, so they get something too. Today's episode of Seriously Wrong is also brought to you by having 2 ads in a row. Now, a lot of shows these days, they'll just have 1 ad in a row. Fake ad, real ad, comedy fake ad, or a real ad for a real product. You name it.
It's like I was just getting into this ad, and now there's only 1 of them, and it's over. I wish there was 2 in a row.
Well, that's the Seriously Wrong promise. Some of the time, we will do 2 ads in a row. Now, mind you, there'll be fake comedy ads. We don't typically
we don't do
advertise for
real
products
ads.
or anything. This is a joke ad.
Yeah, we're funded by Patreon. We don't. Concepts can't actually purchase ad space on podcasts.
We find it to be a good device. Proud sponsor of today's Seriously Wrong podcast.
And now I think it's time for the part of the show where we read some letters from the audience, get some feedback. What do you think?
That sounds like a real hoot to me. Here, let me just unfold the paper. Dear Wrong Boys, if Snark is so bad, why are you so snarky? Best wishes, Clara.
I don't think we're snarky. I didn't really notice that.
Yeah, I wouldn't self-describe as snarky. We do crack jokes.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's a comedy show. You got to crack jokes.
Satirical.
And definitely. We'll do some biting satire, some real on-the-money, hitting-the-mark satire.
That's it. That's what Clara's missing, is that it's really on the money. What we do is really on the money. It's in the form of a performance. So that's the mistake there.
All right. So excuse you, Claire, but that's okay. So this is a letter from Jesse. It says, hi, guys. I'm having a bit of trouble with your Snark episode. One of the reasons I love your show is because of how snarky it is. Remember the Sweat Pledge episode? You guys snarked that jerk into oblivion. When I listen, I like to think that we're all sitting in a room together, gym-facing at one another. Sometimes I recommend you to my friends as Seriously Snark.
Snark is usually something, Jesse, that someone else is doing.
Yeah, it's like when I don't like it when someone's saying an ironic or satirical thing and it's mean to something I identify with or something I wouldn't be mean to. That's more what snark is about. Like it's when I wouldn't do that or when I don't like that. So everything on the show that I do, I like. So it's not snark.
Here's one. Dear hypocrites and cowards, I was a huge fan until you showed your true face today. You're an extremely snarky show, and your facile condemnation of snark has revealed your two-faced and disingenuous heart. Get bent, sincerely, Cameron.
Huh. You know, I just didn't realize our audience was so wrong.
Also, who writes a letter like that? Get a life.
Yeah, like what? Eye roll.
Like I'm reading this note and I like look up at Aaron and we like make eye contact and we're like, what is going on here?
Okay. You've been our fan for this long. You're turning on us for this?
This has been letter writing day at the lunatic asylum.
So dumb.
Thank you for your letter, Cameron.
Yeah, thank everyone for their letters. And yeah, we'll do more next episode as always.
So what's the difference between satire and snark? Is there a meaningful difference there? Like, is snarky a subsection of satire? The thought that occurred to me is maybe that snark is like a performative, satirical way of engaging interpersonally, and like that's what makes it snarky rather than satirical.
One of the things that comes to mind as a distinction is I think satire doesn't have to be condescending or doesn't have to be mean necessarily, though it often does. Snarkiness is a social process in that it relies on you and your pals sharing the knowingness, but you're like building a narrative in the negative space of what you're making fun of. By what you're criticizing, you're implying what's good. And this is a collaborative social process. When we all snark against the same kinds of things over and over again through this web of latent implication, we're building ideas of what the positive is. It's necessarily latent in that kind of omni-critique, in that critique of everything. Saying everything is bad implies that there's a different thing that's good. And while Snark isn't equipped to explicate that specifically, it defines boundaries all around it by what it's ruling out.
So yeah, Snark is like implying what's off limits.
Yeah, we're good. We're above the things that are bad, and the things that are bad, and bad things are off limits.
So yeah, maybe it's not that Snark is inherently bad, but that Snark is a neutral tool that's effective.
Yeah, it's a neutral tool. It's a destructive tool, but it can be used to destroy good things or bad things. So it's like, it's neutral in that it can be used for good or evil, but it isn't neutral in whether it's a building tool or a destroying tool, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So, well, like, for example, with that sort of like pure journalistic spirit of Snark, of like shattering the bullshit and revealing the truth, that definitely can be like a real emancipatory form of destruction if you destroy something that's unjust.
Yeah, exactly.
If you show the emperor's not wearing any clothes and it's an important and valid critique, Snark can actually move society forward. And I think it seems to have worked.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely works sometimes. Like, it's taken over so much of our discourse. To say that nothing it's ever done is good, I think would be like an extremely pessimistic view of the current discourse. Like, there's things about it that I don't like, or that make me feel uncomfortable from a like, oh, that's so mean and negative and meh. But some things are worth being mean and negative towards. Like, if we're just gonna lament the mean-spiritedness without asking, why are people being mean-spirited? Do they have a good reason to be mean-spirited against certain ideas and people? You're kind of missing part of the story.
Yeah, and if we're talking about something of like really supreme ethical importance to communicate and improve on, do we actually have evidence that issuing these indirect, cutting, satirical criticisms is not the way to move the needle? Do we have evidence to show that this doesn't make happen what needs to happen? I'm not sure. I mean, it's proof of a negative, I guess.
Yeah, no, but I know what you mean. Like, people can criticize it as being like pointless or counterproductive or like circle jerky.
When today's episode is Seriously Wrong, brought to you by Circle Jerky with extra protein. Delicious.
Yum, yum. So one of the quotes I'd written down about this was that it's not just an ineffectual form of protest, but it replaces actual protest. And I was like, I don't know if that's true. I don't know if it's ineffectual, and I don't know if it replaces actual protest. I think it might fuel actual protest, and I think it might be pretty effectual sometimes. Like, mobs of snarky people have gotten shit done in this world.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I think my biggest critique of Snark, that is like the thing that I would say about Snark, to really stick it to Snark, is that Snark is an effective way to communicate for whatever reason in our psychology.
Right.
And that it can be used for good or evil. And
yeah, great power, great responsibility.
There are people out there who potentially have internalized this sense of snark around ideas that isn't necessarily going to help them personally or deepen their understanding. They care deeply about things that they could stand to think about more. Or they care deeply about things based on these signaling games, and the implicit thing that they take from it is actually not true. Like, there's a loss of fidelity in the echo, and they believe strongly in something that's not true because it's an echo rather than the substance. And that's probably true. But it's also really useful for like good ideas to reach lots of people.
Yeah, I mean, the alt-right and a lot of the modern left have been propelled into the cultural space that they're in right now through the vector of Snark. Like, I think both of those social movements, which have gotten a lot of attention in recent years, have made good use of this very potent tool. And that just shows this deep dichotomy of like the differing sides to it, that it can be used for good purposes or bad purposes. One of the things I read preparing for this episode was this essay by George Siveroitis, and I wanted to just say his name because a bunch of the stuff I said in this episode comes from it. But the thing that he thinks Snark is uniquely able to do, the thing that it's the best for, is cutting through what he calls smarm, which is stuff that's nice but not good, is one way he puts it. This performance of seriousness or like constructiveness or politeness that's devoid of substance, this sort of like advertising culture, this like bland positivity. One of the ways he puts that Snark is effective against smarm is that it is able to pull out the latent comedic element in polluted politicians, overhyped media moments. It's kind of funny how like vapid so much of mainstream bullshit, pretentious culture is. Another way to put it is valuing tone over truth. Like, oh, come on, can't we all just get along? Can't we just be nice to each other? Like, that's more important than pointing out the harsh truths of the world, right?
Yeah, we're very serious people who want some civility and bipartisan collaboration.
Oh, you're saying something in a negative tone? That means that it's not true.
What about both sides?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, rookie mistake. You're just looking at one side. Because I've got a very big mind, I can see both sides, and I'm happy to explain the other side to you as well.
Smarm.
Smarm.
It's narratives that gloss over inconvenient truths.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of radicals like anarchists and communists would call that liberalism.
Yes, yeah.
I like pulling it out and calling it smarm. That feels good to me because liberalism means so many things. And like in different contexts, like the American definition of liberal is like anyone who's on the left wing. And then like there's different like pejorative versions of liberal, different positive versions of liberal. There's like liberals and neoliberal, it goes on, and there's like a zillion liberals. And we just pull that one out, just do surgery on that grape, and then pull out smarm.
Smarm is another thing that can be a vector for these poor understandings of ideas. People get up on their high horse about how they get both sides, or they're so centrist, or they're so very serious about these topics, and they just repeat these like feel-goody, like sound super rational and logical quotes, and it just like it can be a vector of bad ideas in the same way that you were describing Snark being this like sort of self-replicating, easy form of discourse that doesn't go in depth.
Smarm promotes a false peace that obscures injustice, like an artificial absence of conflict which obscures underlying
like an unprincipled
tensions.
peace. Yeah.
And the powerful super weapon of Snark, which needs to be aimed carefully but is neither bad nor good in itself, can destroy that.
And the other thing that's like really destructive about smarm, but that Snark doesn't actually do a lot to fix, is that smarm makes hope and optimism and joy seem suspicious. Where like anything that kind of seems positive, you just are immediately like, yeah, okay, what's your angle on this?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
trying to sell me Coca-Cola, motherfucker?
Exactly. Like, what's this? Okay, everything is shit. I know everything's shit. My entire web of signifiers, of snarky ideas is telling me that everything's shit. And you're saying that something might be okay? It's like this smarminess is completely colonized positivity, and we're ceding that territory. So in addition to just snarking at smarm and deconstructing it, there needs to be this positive project of reclaiming hope and optimism, because you can't build a better world without those things.
Well, yeah, and using the weapon of Snark against the forces of hopelessness and against the forces of unprincipled, hopeless Snark, counter Snark. Got to get to the top of that Snark stack.
Yeah. Scrambling up. Up.
And we're sort of in an interesting political moment. So, like, I can condemn Facebook and Twitter. I can read a quote from the former vice president of Facebook, who said, the short-term dopamine-driven feedback loops that we've created are destroying how society works. No civil discourse, no cooperation, misinformation, mistruth. Your behaviors, you don't realize it, but you're being programmed. It was unintentional, but now you got to decide how much you're going to give up, how much of your intellectual independence are you going to cede to Facebook. I can quote him and say, these platforms are horrible, but at the very least, because of Facebook and Twitter, we're in this really fascinating moment where fast food chains are clapping back on Twitter. We're 10 months away from Walmart shutting down haters.
Well,
by dunking on them on Twitter. Like, we're right around, like, corporate world is taking on Snark because of the shapes of the platforms
Right. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Because this essay, he's framing this whole thing as like smarm is this thing that companies do and politicians do and university commencement speeches and this bland like corporate world thing. But all of these organizations and things like that, politicians on Twitter, things everywhere, it's getting more snarky. Like, they're getting hip to that. They're saying, oh, we're not going to be like that. We're not going to be smarmy. We're not going to be blandly positive and like corporate speak anymore. Now we're going to clap back too. So yeah, it's interesting that how that's evolving and how that dialectic is moving. And now you got to snark at the snark, or like maybe smarm a bit at the snark, like good smarm. I don't know if that's a thing, but it is a weird place that trying to get into here.
I think, corporate speak and politicians could hold on to the world of smarm if they never went beyond it. They could really dominate it. It would be a big fight to get people to be optimistic, hopeful, positive in their language and stuff like that. But I feel like the second these corporations start clapping back, the exact moment they start dunking on the haters and implying weird shit about each other.
Yeah.
The second that happens, it's like the floodgates are open. It's no longer, the world of smarm no longer belongs to the corporations and the politicians. It's the idea of positivity, hopefulness. It's like, we need to take over this place. We need to take this land over in the social justice wars. We need to invade the realm of positivity, reconstructive. I'm not sure that I would call it good smarm or...
Yeah, because the smarm, one of the key aspects of it is that it's vacuous and empty and ultimately not what it appears to be. So that's the part you want to throw out.
Yeah, but it gives us space to create something new, to create something which is reconstructive and positive.
Yeah, because you want to build your optimism on something real and on... Like, we don't want to take over the space of platitudes, but we do want to take joy and hope and optimism back from the platitudes, back from the corporate smarmy culture that's kind of letting them go, at least in some instances.
Yeah, and we need to make sure that niceness isn't synonymous with... Because niceness is pretty good and important. We don't want to leave niceness to always be something that's obscuring some sort of horrific injustice. We don't want niceness to be the thing that you do when you're trying to take financial advantage of someone. Or niceness is the thing that you do when you're trying to avoid some sort of hard truth, especially about like your own behavior or something like that.
Yeah.
We live in a chaotic moment where all tools are on the table. Communication is an open field. We need to figure out the boundaries of this stuff. We now go to the old anti-snark communication strategy team sketch.
Yeah, it's like the first communication strategy sketch, except the opposite.
It's a repetition in a sense, but also an inversion.
And this is the part where we explain the sketch before the sketch, and now it's time for the sketch.
And we explain it because we want to make sure that you get both the signifier and the signified.
And that's also why we explain the explanation.
And now the sketch. I would never, ever be snarky. It shows a corruption of the character.
I just don't see any reason to be negative.
Yeah. When your husband dies at a young age, you got some young kids, you should say, this is good.
Well, at least look for the silver lining.
Yeah, where's the bright side?
Now I'll have more free time, or now I'll get to explore dating again. And these killjoys, these snarky, negative, just rude and crude. Nasties.
Why do they hate joy so much?
Exactly. That's what I'm wondering.
There's nothing more joyful than not calling out abhorrent, violent political speech. That brings me joy. And that would bring them joy too if they stepped up to the plate.
Call it out. Absolutely call it out, but do it in a polite way. You have to observe the proper forms of this type of civil discourse. The most important thing about civil discourse is the form, not the content.
I couldn't say it better. That's exactly what I'm trying to say. That's so right. Okay, well, imagine this. So one person, he's very serious, very calm, very rational. He says, how's this for an idea? I think that we should flay all human children alive. And then someone comes back at them and they go, oh, you're so evil, you're so bad, you're so stupid, like blah, 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 blah. What's the audience going to say? That person's unreasonable. This person actually is very calm.
They're going to go to his side. I've seen it a million times. People start believing in flaying children. You know, he came in there with a constructive premise, an idea of his own he was putting forward in a polite, civil way.
Yeah, and if you just shoot that down, just without engaging with it.
Yeah, without,
you're
recognizing,
no better than him.
Hey, thank you for putting forward this idea. I hadn't thought of it before, and I do disagree.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll give a few reasons about why I disagree.
But start by trying to connect with his emotional state and say like, oh, that's a valid idea. I could see how someone could believe that. You could be like, you know what? I too am fascinated by the raw viscera of cutting open the human children of Earth. But when I look at the pros and cons, I really wonder if it's the best idea. Now, I'm not an expert. I'm an idiot. I don't know anything, so don't take what I say seriously. But maybe we shouldn't.
Yeah, I like that. You start with the compliment, then you move on to a gentle criticism. And sometimes I even like the compliment sandwich, where at the end you say something else nice. So you might say, and you've been great in this conversation. Some of these people on so-called my side have been really rude to you.
Oh, they're embarrassing.
We can both agree that's awful. You've been great compared to them.
I have to apologize for the whole not cutting open kids crowd, because the lack of civility that they've shown towards your proposal embarrasses me, embarrasses the not flaying children people that I stand for wouldn't do that.
And the truth is, myself, when I've done this, 100% of the time the person changes their mind and starts agreeing with me. It's so effective. You be polite, you be constructive, and people are convinced by the better ideas. That's how civil discourse works.
You know, we wouldn't do it if it didn't work, but the fact is, it just always works.
Positivity, it always works. Smells great coming out your bottom.
Civil discourse, when I smell it from my side, I'm like, whew, that's nice.
And the best part is there's only one side. It's that we're all on a side together. The only ones that are on the wrong side are the uncivil people, and that smells bad.
Oh, it smells horrible.
Stinky.
Makes me pinch my nose and go, yuck.
So it's a communication strategy that works, not being snarky.
Ethically important stuff. Abstain from this entirely. So the thing that we're starting to talk about here, which again, I don't think this just intersects with Snark, but when it does intersect with Snark, I think it's pretty toxic, is the concept of collective narcissism, like narcissistic tendencies towards the collective you're a part of rather than to yourself. So like someone who has a narcissistic personality disorder, they like blame everyone but themselves for things. They refuse accountability. They can explode into rage. They're intolerant of criticism. They're self-centered, impose rules on others. They're controlling, unempathetic.
Oh yeah, it totally sounds like Snark tribes interacting with one another.
Yeah, so like a really bad Snark tribe, they've got an emotional investment in an unrealistic belief about their group's greatness. They think their group's the absolute best. They're outraged that everyone doesn't see it that way. Anyone who doesn't see that way is contemptible. They put other groups down. They're entitled to things. They're the source of all greatness. They're not responsible for any problems.
Yeah, this is just like tribalistic thinking of having like a clear, defined in-group, out-group boundary setting thing. When you start doing that, you start seeing in-group as inherently good. All good things come from in-group. All bad things come from out-group. And Snark is definitely like a huge part of it is defining in-group and out-group boundaries through implication.
Snark, because it's such a powerful weapon, is naturally used by collective narcissists. It's like peanut butter and jelly.
Yeah.
And then on the platforms that we're using
I think it's an unavoidable consequence of it. Like doing that kind of narrative building with people you all agree with and defining what's bad, you're putting people in the out-group, and then like you're going to start thinking the in-group is good.
So with having this cultural moment of Snark being so effective, if people with group narcissistic ideology and tendencies if they're at all better at being snarky, or their snarkiness comes more naturally because they're always paranoid, like legitimately paranoid about other groups, then through the feedback systems and the circles of social media, it can incentivize the wrong things. And it's just, I feel like it's worth saying, like, collective narcissists aren't standard, like, narcissists. It's not like a feature. It's almost like an infection on your ideology to, like, not only believe something, but then start seeing the world in, like, black and white terms that are very accusatory and so on around.
I don't even think it's like a binary thing. Like, some people are this and some people aren't this. I think it's a kind of collective process that, like, we're all participating in. By participating in political debate, you kind of, like, form this sense of collective narcissism. It's just by thinking you're right and other people are wrong, this comes from it. Like, you can attempt to counter it, or, like, I don't want to frame it just as like some people are collective narcissists and they're within these groups. I think it's something that we're all participating in to some degree or another, even when we're trying not to.
Well, that's sort of like regular narcissism, right? Where everyone is on a narcissism spectrum, but then it's a disorder if you meet a certain criteria. I think they do it on like a point scale, and the average, everyone on average is like 15 narcissism points, but the scale goes up to 40. It's the same with ideologies, where you can have like an acute, like, and it's not inherent to the ideology, but it's like a subcultural thing, I think, the way that it sort of travels. And there's just maybe an argument that social media helps incentivize and propagate this.
Yeah, but no, it definitely does. Whether it's like smarmy collective narcissism or snarky, like, often there's both inside of different little groups. Definitely.
But it's far from essentialized to snark, because some of the most like acute examples that the people who do studies on collective narcissism, the most acute examples are like ethno-nationalist groups and like religious groups, that the sort of like religious mania that would say that someone has to be killed for a depiction of a god.
Right.
You know, like that is a collective narcissism by the definitions that they use. And I think another really good example of this is like, when we're talking about smarm, I feel like smarm has, if smarm has a collective narcissism, we'd call it elitism, because smarm is sort of like the hegemonic ideology of the upper middle class and rich in the West, right? Like the sort of like civility and so on.
Yeah, it's not essentialized to snark. Just snark is one of the ways which these collective narcissism bubbles like build and reproduce itself and spreads.
Yeah, and especially if people are forming their ideology based on Xeroxes of Xeroxes of Xeroxes, where they've lost some fidelity, it might keep the group narcissism and lose the nuance. But then also, on the other hand, I gotta say, I want my Xeroxes to spread as much as possible. Like, I hope they don't get too degraded, but it's like, that's part of the challenge of communicating.
If everyone else is Xeroxing and their ideas are getting pushed, like, at least I want some of the starting Xeroxes to be the good ideas. If that's how everything is being spread now through these various ways, like, you can't just opt out. It's more like you got to make the best of it. I feel the same way about the general snarky culture. It's like,
yeah, if we took the Gandhian position to say, no matter how snarky you are to me, I will never snark back.
Which, especially on a comedy show, would be really difficult.
I feel like it's hard to make the argument that that's a worthwhile abstention. Like,
I mean, if as a personal project, if someone wants to do that, I think that's fantastic. You know, but
it takes all kinds.
Yeah. But as a standard for everyone.
Yeah, insufficient evidence to recommend that outcome.
Yeah, no, definitely insufficient evidence. Just one more distinction I want to make is, like, I feel like you can be more or less mean with snark. And, you know, maybe this is just because I'm on our side. When I listen to our show, I think our snark isn't so pointed, and like, even if we're making fun of you, you might be able to laugh along with us. Maybe not. Maybe that's just naive and like you think we're total jerks.
Sometimes not, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, not all the time. I don't think John Stossel, listening to the homelessness episode, would really have laughed along with that.
Yeah, we always go pretty hard on billionaires, but dab it up with your
But we do
billions.
always offer them a way out. We offer them what would be the good thing to do. We're like, anyway, I'm just saying, I think that snarkiness is mean by its form. It's necessarily mean, but there's levels to that. And I do think that some of the most putrid, harshest snark, even if it's directed at the right people or the right bad ideas, is it. I just don't like it, and I want to tone police it. It's wrong.
Well, I think, I mean, without saying that necessarily, there's a like the snarkiness, the indirect cutting criticism exists on a spectrum of harshness, and I think there's an argument that there's such a thing as going too far with this stuff. But yeah, to rule it out or to fully endorse it as in any context, I think would be foolish. And that's called nuance. To return to the thread we talked about earlier in the show, really what's sad about it, I think, I realize, is not the snark itself, but just the capacity for solidarity where there isn't solidarity. And that sort of mourning of the fact that our culture has this sort of problem of negative solidarity, one-upsmanship. And
it builds solidarity in a sense, in the negative sense of like who your in-group is, and like there is real solidarity building to snark, but it's like the thread we started this episode with was sometimes leftist groups make me sad because they're snarking at each other about things that like could be minor disagreements, and like we don't need to be setting in-group and out-group boundaries among the tiny little percentage of people who are already on the bottom left spectrum of the political compass and agree on most things. So we find these ever increasingly small things to argue about and snark at each other about. I don't know, you should be mindful about that, and like not too hard on ourselves and each other, and like it is a potent weapon, and like snark against the real enemies.
Yeah, it's a powerful tool, so I think it's worth, like, as the original point was, like, there's a good argument that the racism of police against people of color in America is a problem that is way more serious than it has been usually talked about.
And more important than animal cruelty.
Yeah, which got more airtime. Yeah, absolutely. So there's a good point there.
Oh, yeah. The argument was never that it's a bad point. It was that the ensuing thread is depressing. And
the people who are criticizing this idea, they also have a good point in that this is a general principle, is not an effective thing. Like we
can't just solve the most important thing first, and everyone puts all work into that, and we don't talk about anything else that's wrong until the most important thing is completely 100% solved.
So the first order of business is take everything that's potentially important and then rank it on orders of importance. Once we've completed that, we begin the process of systemically fixing the first problem, systemically fixing the second. I mean, that's a beautiful dream. That's a grid world block logic joy.
Kind of beautiful. Yeah.
But it's also the person who's wearing this fur coat also wasn't actually suggesting that. That's
Not
the
at all.
paranoid snark world interpretation.
Yeah.
So this has been the Seriously Wrong podcast. Remember this week, everyone, to dismantle patriarchy, white supremacy, the idea of hierarchy, oppose the cruelty to animals, believe in free speech, not in the regressive sense, but the positive sense.
And after you're done all of those things, because those are more important than what I'm about to say, do those first. And then head over to Patreon. We do accept donations. It's how the show is able to run and keep going. We have a suggested donation of $6 a month. That gets you access to bonus episodes, because we love to give back to the people who make the show possible, the people who love us and we love them, and it's a big love fest. That's what Patreon's about. It's about love and money. But not until all the more important things are done.
Once giving us a monthly donation on Patreon is absolutely the most important thing to tackle next, work on it. But until then, systemically work through the list I'm sure that you've already developed.
But for when that time comes, it's patreon.com/seriouslywrong, and there are great bonus episodes there, and there's a Discord server that we have, so that too.
And it's wonderful. You'll meet some of the nicest, cool people in the world, in group themselves, all in one place. So come on down.
So thank you for listening, and have a great, fantastic week this week, and next week too.
Today's episode of Seriously Wrong is proudly brought to you by really efficient metaphors, and specifically the best type of metaphor of all. Yeah, I've got this really bad interpersonal conflict. I don't know how to deal with it. What should I tell them?
Give you the secret to the perfect metaphor. I don't know what your conflict is, doesn't matter. Use a metaphor that incorporates A, scat, poop,
check.
yeah, B, sexuality, or specifically genital references are quite good.
Okay.
And C includes an interpersonal conflict itself. So I call this PGC. Poo, genitals, conflict. That's the basis for your metaphor. Try it out.
The PGC method. I'll give that a shot. Later at home. Hey, can I talk to you?
Sure.
Now, I've said to you before, I've said many times, I'll just say many times, I'm not sure the exact amount, that I don't like it when you leave the lights on all over the house all the time. You don't close the cupboard doors, you leave the lights on.
Yeah, whatever.
It drives me
I'm
crazy.
Trying. Whatever.
Well, he doesn't. Look,
it's not really a big deal.
You know, I care deeply about the environment and also the energy costs.
Right,
We have to
okay.
pay that every month.
It's not that much money.
But I mean, it's also the principle and the energy. And
yeah,
look,
no, you're
it's-
right. You're right.
It's
you're
like
right. I'm trying.
when I come home and I see all the lights on, it's like I'm the bride on my wedding night. And the groom, that's you, has gotten fecal matter on my genitals. And how would that make me feel? How would that make the bride feel?
On your wedding night.
On my wedding night. This
Not
is my
good.
home.
That would
This
cause
is-
an interpersonal conflict.
This is where I live. This is my home.
That's why we're
This
having
is-
an interpersonal conflict, because it's like that for you. Oh.
Do you understand? Did that get through to you?
I've been convinced by the strength of this metaphor.
Later, back with the friend from earlier, it absolutely worked.
The PGC,
100%.
I told you,
PGC,
always
it worked
works.
100%.
PGC, proud sponsor of the Seriously Wrong podcast.
Works every time. Seriously. Give it a shot. We're not pulling your leg. Try it with
Are we
your...
also brought to people by something else? Is this another double ad?
Yes, today's episode of Seriously Wrong is proudly brought to you by having 2 ads in a row 2 times and having both those 2 ads serve as sequels to the earlier ads for a total of 4 ads, each more howlingly riotous than the last.
I think the second one was the most riotous myself, but agree to disagree.
I might go for third, but I think they pass the threshold of riotousness. Proud sponsor of today's Seriously Wrong.
So wrong, and you're wrong, and we're wrong. Seriously wrong. You think your worldview is strong? Just listen to Aaron and Sean, 'cause you're wrong. Wrong. He's wrong, and she's wrong, and they're wrong. Seriously wrong. So you've got systemic trouble, time to break out of your bubble and be wrong.
Next time on Seriously Wrong, the small little man with a heart of steel and mismatched pants holding up devices, is very generous with tips, comes back to get his mystery solved.
Once again, great teeth. Snark is a powerful tool that can be used to destroy. So you can use it to destroy good things or bad things. And so the question, is Snark good or bad? It's kind of the wrong question.
It's a partial merger of sarcasm and satire mixed into interpersonal interactions that serves the purpose to disparage one and build up another. At its best, it can be a guiding light towards truth with accurate criticism. At its worst, it can fall to paranoia of seeing phantoms that aren't really there or projecting phantoms that were never there.
Yeah, or just self-congratulatory, pointless, in-group masturbation that does nothing to help anyone. But it's all in the report. It's a very comprehensive, nuanced report, and we think you're going to love it.
I mean, for all its problems, sir, from what we can tell, it does overthrow tyrants. So ultimately, we do want to keep this in the arsenal.
We can also install tyrants, though, so...
And that's the red hot fire, sir, at the center of the discourse around discourse. What, you wanted us to investigate what sharks are and whether sharks are good?
Oh, sharks. Weird.
It was at this moment that Sean and Aaron looked at each other, locking gym faces. That's a great idea of something to investigate.
Are sharks good? Who knows?
Let me check the textbook for you, bud.
Ever seen Jaws?
What's that? You want to take back all the money you gave us, and you brought a special vacuum to suck it out of all of our
we did
pockets?
spend a lot of it already.
And we did a lot of research on the Snark report. I think you misspoke. We both heard Snark.
Yeah, 2 against 1. Really? Oh, he's turning the vacuum on.
You know what? You can have it.
I don't want to be greedy. I'll open up some of my pockets. I still got some.
I'm going to leave some of my pockets open, some of my pockets closed, sir.
Yeah, we did do work. It's only fair. It is your fault.
Yeah, typically in society, you're not allowed to take money back. Like, I can't give you $10,000 one day and then come back in like 4 or 5 days.
No, but if you pay for a service and they deliver completely the wrong service, most service providers will either do the right thing for free or give the money back. That's pretty common practice. But we're not most service providers. We're different.
Sir, you taking this money back is like, say there's like a wild fox and a dove in the woods, and the wild fox got his fecal matter on the dove's genitals.
Oh, I was going to say, if the wild fox got his fecal matter on the dove's genitals and then tore the genitals off with its teeth.
And so the tiny little man with the teeth thing gave all the money back and took his report.
Once again, just reversed the vacuum, sent it all back.
And he took the report. He said, "Thank you, sir."
This is a better question than mine anyway.
I've joined your side.
Next week, sharks. So yeah, that's what the next episode's about, sharks.